One in Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Welcome back, everybody, to the Coptic Rites class. We're happy to have you again. We will start with the Coptic lesson. So today we are going to learn 3 new letters in the Coptic alphabet. These letters are different from English. So we've already finished all of the letters that look like English, the easy letters. And last time we took 3 letters that look a little bit different. So today we'll take 3 more. So like we did last time, I would like some volunteers to review the letters that we learned. So please raise your hand to review some of the previous letters that we learned. Okay, Gloria, can you review for us the first screen, these 4 letters? Just say the name and the pronunciation, like Alpha A, like that. Go ahead.
Okay. Alpha, A, Vita, V or B, E, Zeta, Z.
Good, thank you. Is Philo with you?
No, not today.
Okay. All right, so I'd like another volunteer to do the next set of letters. If I don't get volunteers, I will call upon people. Okay, so let's. Mina, would you like to try these letters?
Yeah. Okay, Yotan, it's shaped like an L, pronounced like an L. An example is Sid. And then we have
Sorry, Mina. Iota is like like an I, not an L.
Okay, sorry. I'm gonna tell. Because I know a lowercase L is similar to an I.
Okay. Next one.
And then we have Geba, which sounds like a K. And pronounced like a K. Example is like. And then we have May with it shaped like an M. And it's pronounced like an M. An example is the moon. And then finally we have Nay with it shaped like an N. And it's pronounced like an N. And an example is near.
Good, thank you, Mina. Okay, Gabby, can you do the next set of letters?
Sure. U or O, shaped like an O, pronounced like an O, like not. Sema looks like a C, pronounced as an S, like in city.
Good.
Tav, which is shaped like a T or J.
T, it's a T. This is like a T with like a little tail underneath it, but it's a T.
T, pronounced as a T, like test.
Good.
Looks like a W. Pronunciation is O-A, and like board.
Yes, like a long O, like an O-A. Good, thank you. All right, the next set. Let's see. Nadia, do you want to do the next set?
I'm sorry, I'm driving right now. Forgive me.
Okay, no problem. Nader, do you want to do the next set here, these 3 letters?
Yeah, it is Ita, which is pronounced as E, Ro, which is pronounced as R, K, which is pronounced as T. That's it.
Yeah, Ki, which is pronounced like K.
T.
And then in some Greek words, it's pronounced like a sh, like sh, or like a kha, like the Arabic kha. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last one here, let's see. Dalia, do you want to do these?
I'm sorry, I'm driving.
Okay, no problem. Let's see, Fanuel, do you want to do the next set here? Okay, if anyone was not responding, Sue Hakim, you want to do the next one?
Gamma,
Yes.
Delta,
So
Lola.
Yeah, so Gamma is pronounced like
G.
G, yes, or GH,
G.
like Ra, Rin, or NG. If there's two Gammas together, then the first one is an N, the second one is a G. Good. And then Delta is pronounced
D.
D or Z, like a soft Z, like Z or the.
Z.
And the last one, Lola, is pronounced like
L.
Yes. So these two, the shapes are similar. It looks like a triangle, but the delta has a bar underneath it, and then the Lola doesn't have a bar underneath it. We will learn one more letter today that also looks a little similar to these letters, so don't confuse them. So the first letter we will learn today, it's called P. It's called P. This is the, in Greek, this is the pi. You know, if you've done some geometry, you know, pi, like, you know, the measure of the radius of a circle, you know, pi 3.14. So this is P. It looks like, I don't know, like a box without a bottom, or like a table, and it's pronounced like a P. Like this word here, pa yot, pa yot. Pa means my, P-A is pi, pa, and then yot means father. So pa yot means my father. Okay. The next letter is called Hori. It looks like a backwards S, like if you write an S, but you write it backwards. So Hori, remember the Eta in Coptic, which was the H, is like a long E. So Hori is the H sound. Okay. Hori is the H, like in house, the H sound. Like this example here, we have Ne alpha Hori, Nah, and then we have Ro E N, Nahrin, 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 which means before. Okay, so this is Hori. And then the last letter, Jinja. So this looks like a delta. Remember, delta was like a triangle with like a little hat. So Jinja is a triangle with two hats. Okay, this is Jinja. Jinja, sometimes also it's called Ganga. Jinja is pronounced G most of the time, like the word Agb, A-G-B, Agb, which means hour. That's where we get the word Agbeya from. Agbeya is the book of the hours, the book of the Agb, the hours. And sometimes it's pronounced like a J if it's followed by one of these E vowels, the E, the iota, or the eta. So like here we have J, like we say what J penyo, right? This is very common word, J. So here the Jinja is a J because it's followed by an E. Here the Jinja is a G because it's not followed by an E. It's Ag, not Aj. Okay. All right. So let's try to read some words using the letters that we just learned. All right. So I would like some volunteers first. Raise your hand. Okay. Gloria, can you do the first one?
Pascha.
Excellent. Pascha. Pascha or Pascha. Pascha is the Passover. You see in the picture here, you know, remember in the Passover, when the Lord told Moses, when he was trying to get the children of Israel out of Egypt, and he told him that all the Israelites, they kill a lamb, the Passover lamb, and then they put his blood over the lintel and the sides of the gateway. So this made the sign of the cross because you have blood on top, which also spills to the bottom, and then you have blood on both sides, so it looks like a cross. And then the Lord said, I will see the blood and I will do what? I will pass over that house. So that's where the word Passover comes from. So Pascha is Passover. Good job. Okay, next one. Jonathan?
So it's
So this is the hori that we just learned, which is the H.
ho
He.
he
And this is the Lolla, the L.
hela ho.
Good. Hela hope. Hela hope. This is an expression. It means let's go. Even today in Egypt, when they're trying to do something, they say, well, what? Hela hope, let's go. So it's actually a Coptic word, hela hope. Good job. Okay, Thomas, the next one. Thomas, if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yes.
Paraclete.
Good, very good. Paraclete. Paraclete. Paraclete is the comforter, the Holy Spirit. We say in the hymn of Asumen, right? The Paraclete. Good job. Okay, let's see. Next. Okay, I don't have people raising their hands, so I'll start picking on people now. Mina, you want to do the next one?
Yes. Abib.
Good. Epip. Epip. Epip is one of the Coptic months. In Arabic, it's pronounced Abib. You know, in Arabic, there is no P. There's no hard P. So the P becomes like a B. So it became Abib. But the correct Coptic pronunciation is Epip. On 5 Epip, this is the feast of Saint Peter and Saint Paul. This is the feast of the apostles. Okay, good job. Okay, Gabby, next. Okay, so the sema is always an S in Coptic, right? Sok, good. And then this is the hori, the H.
Heat.
Good. Good. Suk heat. Suk heat.
Heat.
Suk heat. In Arabic, this is the zoghota. In Coptic, it's suk heat, which is the hiccup, suk heat. The word suk means to close. Like you probably remember, you know, your parents, they tell you what, suk el bab, right? Close the door. So suk is Coptic, it means close. So suk heat, because the hiccup, this is closing of the vocal cords in your throat, and that's what gives the hiccup sound, like that. This is, so your diaphragm is contracting and your vocal cords are closing. So that's how you make that sound of the hiccup. So suk heat is the closing of the vocal cords. Good job. Okay, next one. Let's see. Ustaz George, would you like to try?
That's T.
Yes.
R. A.
Good.
Tarapeza.
Yeah. It's هنا في جنكم. We
Yeah.
didn't talk about the jinkim yet, but the jinkim gives it like a small E sound. So It-Rapeza.
Tarapeza.
Which بالعربي ترابيزة. But it's actually a Coptic word, It-Rapeza, which means table.
You have to put it. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, somebody else.
Yeah, but I have to like do my well no, I have to do my like.
Okay. Who hasn't had a chance yet? Siham, do you want to do this one?
Ava Hadid.
Good, good. Ava Hadid. This is a saint. His name is Ava Hadid, not Hadid like, you know, iron, but his name is Ava Hadid. Good job. Okay, next one. Valerie, do you want to try this?
Okay. Abakir.
Excellent. Apakir. This is also another saint, Saint Apakir. You know, there's a city in Egypt. It's called what's called Abu Ir. Abu Ir is Apakir. It's named after Saint Apakir. Many of the cities in Egypt are actually Coptic words. Okay, next one. Salwa, do you want to try this one?
This is Agbeya. It's
Yes.
the same word as we pronounce.
Yes, except in Coptic, Akpeya is a hard P. In Arabic, it becomes Agbeya. You know, the P becomes a B. So Agbeya, like I told you, the word Agb means hour. So Agbeya is the book of the hours because we have the first hour, the third hour, like that. Good job. Okay, let's do a few more. Let's go a little bit faster if we can. We'll start all over again. Well, let's see if anybody else hasn't had a chance yet. Ferris, that's Ferris. Do you want to try? Okay, so we'll start.
Israel.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Israel. Good. Israel, which is Israel. Good. The next one is very easy because I already told it to you before. Agb, which is hour. Good. Okay, Gloria, you want to do the next one?
Go.
The third one?
Oh, sorry. Korvan.
Korvan or Korban, which is the holy bread. In Arabic, Orban. Good job. Nadia, can you do the next one?
We'll try. Oh boy.
This is the H, the Hori.
Oh, this is H. Okay, then it's
And this is the Lolla, the L.
Haryak? No, I don't know what the other one, the third letter. I don't know it.
L.
Haryak?
Lolla.
Harak?
Halak.
Yeah, so halak, yeah, halak.
Halak, which is the earring.
Earring.
Yeah.
Yeah, halak. Okay.
Okay. All right. Nader, the next one.
Halak.
This is ship.
Ship. Yes. Did you know that ship is a Coptic word? Yes.
I know. It's first time to know that.
Everybody, all the kids, I know you're familiar with the ship because when you were young and you didn't listen, you were familiar with the ship. So ship is actually a Coptic word. I had a friend of mine one time. I was like talking about different languages, and I said, you know, the Coptic even has a word for slippers, which is ship. And then the friend asked me, do you have a word for ghost? And I said, yes, the word for ghost is bich. We didn't take this one yet. We'll take it later. So my friend said, so how do you say a ghost wearing ship? And I said, bich nim ship. So a ghost with ship. Okay, next, Thomas, you want to do the next one here?
Can you remind me what that first one is again? Is that a Lola?
This is the one we learned today, that the Jinja. Remember, it has the two hats. This is the Jinja. So this is a G. Gom, very good. Gom, which means book. Very good. Okay, let's see next. Valerie, you want to do the next one?
Okay. There.
So this is the pi, the P.
Yeah.
P, right? And then this is the Hori, the H.
P.
And then this is an M.
P.
P. Mot. M-O-T, right?
Yes.
So P. Ehmot, which means the grace. You know the hymn, Be'ehmod harem ben shois. Like that. Be'ehmod means the grace. Be'ehmod harem ben shois, the grace of the Lord. Good job. Okay. There's somebody that just a dot. So, Mr. Dot, do you want to do the next one? Okay, Mr. Dot didn't respond. Andrew, you want to do this, the next one? Okay, let's try somebody else. Siham?
Han mesh
Mish.
wish.
Han Mish, good. Han Mish, which means many. Han Mish. Like we say Han Mish and Rumbi, many years. Okay, and the last one, Mina, you want to do the last one? Papa, good. We say like Papa Ava Tawadrus, right? Means Pope. Good job. All right. So just to review, these are the 3 letters we learned today. I know the letters are a little bit more difficult now because at the beginning they were all like English and pronounced like English, but now we are getting the letters that are different, right? So the first letter here, P, which looks like the pie, the Greek pie, and it's pronounced like a P, like Payot. The Hori, which looks like a backwards S, this is the H sound, like Naharin, that's the Hori. And then the Jinja, which looks like a triangle, but with like 2 hats on top. So this is the G or J. Most of the time it's G, like Agb. And if it's followed by an E vowel, then it's a J, like Benio. Okay, so P is P, Hori is H, Jinja is G or J. So the Coptic word that we will learn for this week is actually very easy. It's how do you say yes? It's 2 letters, se. Actually, if you know Spanish, you say yes in Spanish, but you say sí. So it's very, very similar to Spanish. So se, which means yes. Like somebody says, you know, is your name so and so? And you want to say yes, you say se. Are you a boy? If you're a boy, then you say se. Okay, so se, which means yes. All right, any questions about the Coptic?
Our group gets a good question.
Yes,
Can you go back 1 slide for a minute?
1 slide, okay.
1 slide. So I noticed that here Jim equals 4, and how come it's not hour? Because in a great wind, because in a Godward response for great winds, we say our Father instead of saying 4. So my question is, why did it say J equals 4 in the great winds when we say our?
Yes, good question. So J actually, the word for here is, it's not an exact translation because J doesn't really have an exact translation in English. J is kind of like the quotation marks, you know, when you say, you know, for example, Jesus said, and then you open quotes and you say, you know, I am the bread of life, and you close the quotes. So if you look in Coptic, it will say Isos pe J, and then Anok pe if oikente if oin. So J is like the beginning of a quotation. So the loose translation for it is 4, but it's not exactly 4. So yeah, we say J benyotet khenne fi owi. We don't really say for our Father, but we are saying like we are beginning a saying, or we are beginning a quote, because this is what the Lord taught us when you pray, saying Je benyot. Okay.
Okay. Then that's what I thought.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. So let's switch over to the lesson today. So we'll take a short break from the church rites, and we'll learn a little bit about history. So we will learn the history of the Old Testament, because many times when we read the Old Testament, you know, if we don't know the history behind it, sometimes we could get confused. So I want us to learn together, you know, where the Old Testament, you know, what are the main events, and then that way, when we are learning together, when we're reading the Old Testament, we know where we are. Okay, so we will talk about the Old Testament timeline today. Probably this will take most of the time, and then maybe next week we can, you know, learn a few things about some of these timelines. So of course, we begin with the creation of Adam and Eve. Okay, the creation is roughly 4,000 years before Christ. You know, BC means before Christ, right? So roughly 4,000 years before Christ began the creation. Now the creation, you know, God created the world in how many days? Who can say?
6, and on the 7th he rested.
Yes, he created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. Now, are these days like 24-hour days? No, for two reasons. The first reason, with God, 1,000 years is like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. Okay, so God is not under the measure of time like we are. How do we count the day as 24 hours? This is the time it takes the earth to revolve around itself, to make a complete revolution. So from the time, you know, that we see the sun, for example, we are, for example, in the US, in Texas. So the sun shines, let's say, you know, at 7 o'clock in the morning. From 7 o'clock in the morning at that specific spot until the earth makes an entire revolution all the way back until we see the sun again, this is 24 hours. So humans count time like that, okay? But God doesn't count time like that. That's the first reason. The second reason is actually the light, or the sun and the moon, were not even created until the fourth day. So even if we say, okay, we are going to count days as 24 hours, so at least the first 4 days, they could have been millions of years, of our years. So God, so that even when we say the creation is, you know, 4,000 years before Christ, this is an approximation, because when did the creation happen before that? You know, we're talking about the creation of Adam 4,000 years ago, or not ago, but 4,000 years before Christ. But the creation of the earth and everything could have been thousands of years before that. Even some, you know, some calculations are saying even the 4,000 is not, you know, 100% accurate. It may be 5,000, it may be 5,500 years or so, but we'll just go with 4,000 years, okay? After the creation, about, you know, 1,500 years later was the event of the flood, when Noah built the ark. And why did this happen? Because the people became very evil, and we will talk about that, God willing, next time. But the people became very evil to the point where God said, you know, people are just too evil, and so Noah, get into the ark, you and your family, and take all the animals with you, 2 of every kind, and I will flood the whole earth and basically eradicate all the evil people from the face of the earth. So this was about 2,400 years before Christ, at the time of Noah. After Noah came the patriarchs. I want you guys to pay attention with this timeline, because I'm going to ask you questions about that after we're done, okay? So the patriarchs began with Abraham. Patriarch means like a father, like a great father. So, and this was the beginning of promises. God told Abraham, leave your house, leave your people, leave your city, and come out. And he did not tell him exactly where to go. He just said, come out. Come to a place I will show you. Why? Because Abraham was maybe the only good person in the whole world at that time. And so God separated him. Even among his family, they were not really very good. They were not really, worshiping God correctly. And so God told him, I don't want you to be contaminated with the rest of the people. Come out and I will bless you. And this was the beginning of the promises. And so he told him, I will bless you. I will make you a great nation. I will make your sons as the stars of heaven and the sand on the seashore. And this promise was fulfilled in his son Isaac. So Isaac is the second patriarch, and this was about 2060 BC. And then Isaac begot Jacob. This was around 2000 BC. And then Jacob begot Joseph. Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph was the second youngest. So after Joseph was Benjamin. Okay. We'll talk more about this, Bardo, hopefully next time. But we notice that it's not usually the firstborn who is chosen. So the sons of Abraham had actually his firstborn was Ishmael, but God did not accept Ishmael. He accepted Isaac. Isaac had two sons. He had Esau and Jacob. Esau was the firstborn. Esau was rejected and Jacob was accepted. Jacob had 12 sons. The first one was Reuben. He was rejected. And actually the one who was chosen was Judah, who was the fourth. But let's go so we can go back to the to the timeline here. So what happened was, I'm sure you know the story of Joseph. His brothers were envious of him because his father loved him and he gave him more attention than he gave his children. This was a mistake from our father Jacob. He should have treated all of his sons equally. But also Joseph deserved extra attention because he was very obedient. He was humble. He was, listening to his father. So that's why his father gave him more attention. So his brothers were very envious of him. They took him, they threw him in the pit, and then they sold him to the Midianites. The Midianites took him and sold him to Egypt. And then there was a famine in the land. And the famine was everywhere except in Egypt because Joseph, God revealed to him what would happen. And so he began to store grain for 7 years. And so he was able to feed the Egyptians and feed all the nations around Egypt. He would sell the grain to them. And so the Hebrews also, which are his brothers, they came to Egypt and they bought grain from him. And then Joseph allowed them to come and they lived in Egypt, in the land of Goshen. So this was around 1870. So from that point on, the Hebrews are the sons of Israel. Israel is Jacob. Okay, so Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. He wrestled with God, and after he wrestled with God, God changed his name from Jacob to Israel. So the sons of Israel are the Hebrews or the Israelites, which are the 12 sons of Jacob. So they went and dwelt in Egypt, and they stayed in Egypt for about 300 years. After 300 years, Pharaoh, there rose a new Pharaoh in Egypt, and he did not recognize, the authority of Joseph or the Hebrews, and so he enslaved them. And then he began to try to kill all the male firstborn of the Hebrews because they were very, very many and they grew. They basically outnumbered the Egyptians. And so the people started to cry out to God out of their agony. And so God sent to them Moses to rescue them. We know the story of Moses when he was a child. His mother was, afraid that they would kill him because they were killing all the male children. And so she put him in a basket and she put him on the Nile. And then the daughter of Pharaoh saw him and she took him and she adopted him as if he was her own son. And so he grew in the house of Pharaoh in the palace as a prince. And when he was 40 years old, he went out and he saw an Egyptian person beating a Hebrew. And so he looked this way, he looked that way, he didn't see anybody. And so he killed the Egyptian and buried him and, let the Hebrew go. And he thought that by doing this, he is saving his people. Well, the next day he went back out, and this time he saw two Hebrews fighting with each other. And so he tried to judge between them. And so one of them told him, who made you a judge among us? Who made you a judge or a leader upon us? Do you want to kill me like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? So Moses was afraid when he heard this, and he knew that what he has done has become known. And so he fled from Egypt, and he lived 40 years in the desert. After 40 years, God appeared to him in the burning bush that we know. That's, on Mount Sinai. During Kiyak, it will say what the burning bush seemed by Moses. This is the burning bush that he saw. God appeared to him in the burning bush and he told him to go back to Egypt and to bring the people out of Egypt. So he went back to Egypt, and through 10 plagues that God brought upon the Egyptians and upon Pharaoh, Moses was able to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. And he took them out and they stayed in the wilderness for 40 years, 40 years, roaming around in the wilderness. We'll talk about why that happened maybe next time. Until they went back to the place that God told Abraham at the very beginning, this is, where I'm going to give you your inheritance. So it's a full circle now. So here we have Abraham. God told him, leave your country, come out to the place I'm going to give you as an inheritance. Abraham listened to the Lord. Isaac listened to the Lord like his father did. Jacob did not listen very well. He left, he went outside and he came back, and then he went to Egypt. And so they stayed in Egypt for all this time. Then finally, after Moses came out, it's like he's bringing them back to where they started from, which is the land of Canaan, the promised land. Moses brought the people all the way to the edge of the promised land, but he did not go in. He died on the mountain and God buried his body. And his disciple Joshua is the one who brought the people into the promised land. Okay, so this was around 1400 before Christ. After Joshua brought the people of Israel into the land, then God started to appoint judges for them. A judge is like a ruler or a leader, but not a king. And the judge typically was anointed by God. And like some of the famous judges that we know, like Samson, Samson the strong, he was one of the judges. Another judge, maybe you've heard of him, is Gideon. Gideon was also one of the judges, and he judged for Israel. A female judge, her name was Deborah. Deborah was one of the judges. So there was the period of the judges. So they were kind of the rulers of Israel. And then Samuel, we know Samuel, he was brought into the temple when he was very young. And then God spoke to Samuel and he said, speak, Lord, for your servant hears. And then God appointed him as the judge and the prophet. So Samuel was the last judge and he was the first prophet. Of course, Moses was a prophet before him, but with Samuel began the time of the prophets. So during the time when Samuel was judging for the people said, what, we want a king. And Samuel tried to reason with them. And they said, no, we want a king that goes out before us and come in and has a palace and has an army and has all of these things, just like all the nations around us, they have a king. We also want the king. So Samuel went to God and he cried to God, and God told him, don't worry, Samuel, don't be upset. They have not rejected you as a judge, they have rejected me as their king. Because when there was a judge, this judge was appointed by God or anointed by God through the prophet. So if you say, I don't want a judge anymore, I want the king, so you're saying, I don't want God to be the king, I want a human king. So God told Samuel, they have not rejected you, they have rejected me. Give them what they want. You know, it's kind of like what little kids, they go to their parents and they say, you know, I want candy. And their parents say, no, you cannot have candy now because, you know, you already have too much sugar and it's not good for you and it's not good for your teeth. I want candy. No, habibi, maybe later. You cannot have candy now. I want candy. So after a while, the parent is what? Okay, fine, here, take the candy. And I know that you're going to get a stomach ache and I know that you're going to be upset. But since you won't stop, I'm going to give you what you want, but I know this is not good for you. This is exactly what happened here, because the children of Israel were acting very, very childish, just like these kids. We want a king. No, habibi, a king is not good for you. We want a king. A king is going to do this and this to you. No, we want a king. Just give us a king. So God said, okay, just give him a king. So the first king that was appointed or anointed was King Saul. And King Saul actually was, at the beginning, he was humble and he listened to God and he listened to Samuel. Samuel was basically like his confession father. He would go to Samuel for many of the decisions, and he would obey Samuel and he would obey God. Eventually, and especially after the battle between David and Goliath, so at one point there was a war between the Israelites and the Philistines, and Goliath was among the Philistines. We know the story of David and Goliath. David killed Goliath. So the people started to chant for David. So Saul became envious of David, and he started to persecute him, and he started to want to kill him because he knew that he would be the next king. But Saul made, many other mistakes. And the last mistake that he did is that he disobeyed God. What happened? Samuel told him there was another war, and Samuel told him, go get ready for the war and wait for me. I will come on such and such a day. We will pray. I will offer a sacrifice. I will bless the people, and then you can go to war and you will be victorious. Okay? So Saul waited for Samuel to come, and Samuel was a little late. Not a whole lot late, but he was a little late. So when Saul saw that Samuel was late, so he said, okay, I will raise the sacrifice. So he raised the sacrifice. Saul is not a priest, he's not a prophet. He doesn't have the right to raise a sacrifice. And as he was almost done, so as I said, Samuel was not that late. So it only took time for him to offer the sacrifice. So we could say maybe an hour, 2 hours. Then Samuel came, and Samuel told him, what did you do? And Saul started to make up excuses. And so Samuel told him, God has rejected you as king. So then Samuel left Saul, and he did not go visit him anymore. And he went to David, and he anointed David as the next king. David was anointed king without a kingdom because Saul was still alive. Technically, if Saul was obedient, he would have said, okay, I have sinned. And God has rejected me as king, so I will give up the kingdom and let the person that God chose to be king. Of course, Saul is not going to do that. He became more envious and more evil and more stubborn. So David was a king without a kingdom until the death of Saul. Then David became the second king. David is like the greatest king of Israel. Everybody knows David, right? David had a son. His son was Solomon. You've heard of Solomon, I'm sure. He's the wisest man that ever lived. Solomon was loved by God, and all the time of Solomon was peace. There was no wars at all during the time of Solomon. Solomon built the temple. when the children of Israel were in the desert, God commanded them to build a tabernacle. A tabernacle is like a huge tent. It's temporary. David wanted to build a house for God, a temple, but God told him, you will not build a temple for me because you had too many wars, so your hands are full of blood, but I will allow your son Solomon to build a temple for me. So Solomon built a temple. After Solomon died, his son Rehoboam became king. This is important now. How many tribes of Israel do we have? Somebody tell me, how many sons of Israel were there?
12.
12, good. So we have 12 tribes of Israel. So the kingdom, maybe we'll see that next time, I can show you a map. So the kingdom is like 12 parts. It's like if you think in the United States, we have states, right? We have 50 states, but if you can imagine that there are 12 states, this is how it's divided. So during this time, during the time of Saul, David, and Solomon, it was all one kingdom because it was one king. At the time of Rehoboam, at the very early time of his reign, like maybe a few days after he became king, the people went to Rehoboam and they told him, you know, your father was very hard on us. He made us do a lot of work, of course, because they built the temple, and so there was a lot of labor and things like that. So they're asking Rehoboam, you know, please, you know, take it a little bit easy on us. So he told them, okay, let me think about this. Then he gathered the elders, the wise people among the people, and he asked for their opinion, for their feedback. And they told him, if you deal good with these people, they will be your servants. They will listen to whatever you tell them to do. So then he gathered the youth, his friends, and he said, what do you think I should do? Of course, his friends gave him very bad advice. They told him, you know, you are now the king. Why do you have to listen to the people? You tell them, if my father, you know, did X with you, I will do double X with you. They told him, you tell them, if my father chastised you with sticks, like if he beat you with sticks, I will beat you with scorpions. I will be even more stricter than my father. A word of advice from me to you, to the young youth and the children. Do whatever you want, but do not give each other advice. This is the worst thing that you can do, because you don't have experience, you don't have wisdom, you don't have the knowledge that the elders have. So if you want wisdom, you seek wisdom from the elders, you seek wisdom from the priests, you seek wisdom from your parents. Don't give each other advice. This is the worst thing that you can do. So his friends gave him this very bad advice. And of course he liked it, because he's like, yeah, it played to his ego. I am the king. Why should I listen to these people? I could do whatever I want. So the people came back to him and they said, so, you know, your majesty, you know, what is your response? What shall we tell the people? Are you going to deal with us fairly? Are you going to be, you know, good with us? And so he told them, no, I am the king. I'm going to do whatever I want. And if my father, you know, did so and so, you can expect me to double your labor and to do all of that. So of course the people were upset, and 10 tribes left the kingdom. They separated, and they went after another man. His name is Jeroboam. So don't be confused with the names, because they are similar. So Rehoboam is the son of Solomon. Jeroboam is the other person that the people made king. So 10 tribes left Rehoboam, and they said, why do we have to listen to this guy? We can make up our own king. Those 10 tribes were in the north. Okay, 10 tribes in the north. And the 2 tribes that were left over are in the south. The 2 tribes that were left over are Judah and Benjamin. The 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And then the other 10 tribes are in the north. From that point, the kingdom was split into 2. And that's going to remain forever. They will never reunite again. The north kingdom is called the kingdom of Israel. And the southern kingdom is the kingdom of Judah. Again, the north kingdom is the kingdom of Israel. The southern kingdom is the kingdom of Judah. The capital of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, is Samaria. Have we heard that name? Where did we hear that name, Samaria? During the Great Fast, we hear the story of the Samaritan woman, right? The Samaritan woman was in Samaria. This is in the north. Jesus was a Jew from Judah. He was from the south. Between the north and the south, or between Israel and Judah, there was wars all the time. Now we understand why when the Samaritan woman told Jesus, "How can you speak to me? You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman, and Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Now we understand why. Because from the time of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the kingdom split, and the Israelites, or the people of Israel, or the people of Samaria, had no dealings with the people of Judah. They were enemies. So the northern kingdom, the capital was Samaria, and so sometimes the whole kingdom is referred to as Samaria. The southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, the capital was Jerusalem. What's in Jerusalem? What's the main thing in Jerusalem?
The temple.
The temple. Yes, that Solomon built, the temple. All of the kings of the north, the kings of Israel, every single one of them was evil. No exception. Every single one of those kings was evil. Why? Because they are far from God. They are far from the temple. As a matter of fact, they started to build, temples and build, they called them the high places, to tell the people, you don't have to go all the way to Jerusalem, just come up here and worship and offer your sacrifice and whatever. God did not command that. He said only one place that you offer sacrifice, Jerusalem. So all of the kings of Israel, and of course, if the king is evil, he's the leader, so the people follow him. So we can say that all of the people of the kingdom of Israel were far away from God. In Judah, most of the kings were evil, but there were a few that were good. So like every 4 or 5 kings that were bad, one good king would come and he would try to restore, the worship of God again. And then after he dies, then another evil king comes up and messes everything up, and his successors, until another good king comes and tries to restore again. So in Israel, in the north, in Samaria, everybody's bad. In the south, in Judah, in Jerusalem, most are bad, but some were okay. This was around 900 years before Christ, 930 before Christ. So now we have 2 kingdoms. We have the kingdom of Israel in the north, which has kings, and the kingdom of Israel in the south, which also has kings. So when you read in the Old Testament, you read, for example, in the book of the Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, or 1st and 2nd Kings, you will always find it says in the 7th year of the king of Israel, so and so, which was the 3rd year of the king of Judah. So don't get confused, because when you read it the first time, you're going to say, what's going on here? Yes, there are 2 kings. Always there are 2 kings. There's a king in the north in Israel, and there's a king in the south in Judah. Most of the time, these 2 kings also were at war with each other. A few times they had peace, but most of the time they had war. This continued until the year 700 or so before Christ. What happened? The king of Assyria, invaded the north, and he captured Israel. He captured Samaria, and he took all the people of Israel captives back to Assyria. Okay, so this is the Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom. He tried to also take the south. He also tried to invade Jerusalem. But the king of Jerusalem, his name was Hezekiah, he was a good king. He cried out to God, and this was during the time of Isaiah the prophet. So he went to Isaiah the prophet and he cried to him, and Isaiah cried out to God, and God saved them. So Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, could not invade Jerusalem, even though Jerusalem is a small city compared to what he already, overcame. So he couldn't invade Jerusalem, and he left. And then he was killed by his sons, and the empire of Assyria collapsed. And then came after them the Babylonians. The Babylonians invaded the Assyrians and took over their kingdom. The Babylonians went and tried to capture Jerusalem. During that time, the king was not a godly king. He was an evil king. This was during the time of Jeremiah the prophet. Okay, so now we've seen two prophets. We'll talk also about that, maybe in a few weeks or so, about which kings went with which prophets. Jeremiah the prophet tried to tell the people, the kingdom, or the city will fall, Jerusalem will fall. God has already shown me this. Do not try to fight against the Babylonians. God, because of our sins, God already gave the Babylonians the city. There's nothing you can do. And the people did not listen to Jeremiah, and they persecuted him, and they put him in prison. And that's the time when he wrote the book of the Lamentations of Jeremiah, when he began to see the city fall. Lamentations means crying. So he was crying over the city. So this is the book of the Lamentations of Jeremiah. The Babylonians invaded Jerusalem, and they took all of the Jews captives to Babylon. Who were among those people that they took captive? I'll give you a hint. There was one guy that was thrown to the lion's den, and there were three guys Daniel, and three guys that were put in the fire.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Very good.
Mhm.
Those are the people, among the people that were taken to Babylon was Daniel the prophet and the three young men. 70 years later, only 70 years later, King Cyrus allowed the Jews to return back to Jerusalem. These were the Jews from Judah. Okay, so the Jews from Judah, which is the southern kingdom, 70 years later, they began to return to Jerusalem. What happened to the Jews that were taken to Assyria? They never returned. They were so evil that God basically, just left them out. Until today, so
He abandoned them.
Yes. We said that the two tribes in the south were Judah and Benjamin, and mostly it was Judah because Benjamin was a small tribe. So all the Jews today, if you speak to any of the Jews today, all of them will tell you, I'm from the tribe of Judah. You say, where are the other tribes? Where are the 10 other tribes? Nobody knows. They all dissolved within the other nations, and there is no ancestry to them. There is no recognition. There is no, you cannot tell who's who anymore because they never returned. God did not allow them to return back to Israel or to Samaria. So where did the Samaritan woman come from? Well, when the Assyrians took the Samaritans captives, they left some. They left the people who couldn't walk, the people who were very poor, and the people who were very evil. So they didn't want to bother with them, like the criminals and stuff like that. So they left them there. So there were a few people in Samaria, and of course those people reproduced and whatnot. But the majority of the Israelites from the northern kingdom, they are gone. 70 years later, as we said, King Cyrus, God spoke through him, and he allowed the people to return back to Jerusalem, and they began to rebuild the temple, and they began to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. This was under the leadership of Ezra, the scribe, and Nehemiah, who became the governor later on. So these two people, Ezra and Nehemiah. This all happened around 500 or so before Christ. 100 years later, the very last book of the Old Testament was written, which is the Book of Malachi. The Book of Malachi was written about 400 years before Christ. And this was the last message from heaven to earth. So for 400 years, from the time of Malachi the prophet until Christ came, there was complete silence from heaven to earth. That's why we call this the silent years. When you open your Bible, I know nowadays everything is electronic, but if you find, one of your parents' Bibles or something, you open it, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there's an empty page. Why is there an empty page? It's not because we want to put an empty page. This empty page represents the 400 silent years. It's called the Inter-Testamental Period, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. This is why now we understand when the angel appeared to Zechariah while he was raising incense, Zechariah was terrified. Why was he terrified? Because for 400 years, nobody has seen a vision. Nobody has heard of an angel. Nobody has had dreams, nothing. So he was terrified. When the angels appeared to the shepherds to preach to them the good news, they were terrified. If you read the scripture carefully, you'll see that they were terrified. Because for 400 years, that means they never saw angels, and their fathers never saw angels, and their great-grandfathers never saw angels, and the great-grandfather, 400 years, that's at least 4 generations, right? So for 400 years, until, of course, Christ came, and then that's the beginning of the New Testament. Okay, so I hope this was helpful to you, to give you an idea about the timeline of the Old Testament. Any questions about this?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Weren't there some books after Ezra that many people don't accept, but the Coptics do accept?
Yes, there are books in the so we'll talk about that another time. There are in the Orthodox canon, we don't only have 39 books, but we have 46 books in the Old Testament. So there are 7 more books, but these books also were written before Malachi, but they're just not included in the Protestant Bibles that is published by most publishing companies. Okay.
They're the Deuterocanonical books.
Yes, they are they call them the Deuterocanonical books, which means the secondary canonical books. We don't really use that term because to us they are canonical. They are just as canonical as the rest of the books. But some of the other churches, they call them the Deuterocanonical books. Good. All right. So we will stop here today with this Bible timeline. And next time we will we'll go a little bit deeper into some of these periods. So we'll play a game today together. So somebody actually suggested that we play Kahoot last time. So we'll try that today and see how well it goes. And then after the game, we will pray and